to the Disrupt Your Career podcast, brought to you by Claire Harbour
and Antoine Thiard. We're passionate about helping everyone find fulfillment in their work life.
We believe that big, messy, uncharted career changes are inevitable, and it's up to you to decide.
Will you take control and disrupt, or allow yourself to be disrupted?
We wrote the book about it, and now we share here our conversations with other thinkers in this crucial area.
Settle down and get ready to listen to this dose of wisdom.
Well, this time we're talking to Edie Goldberg. She's the president of Goldberg Associates in Menlo Park, California, a nationally recognized expert in HR and talent management strategy and organizational effectiveness. Prior to starting her own firm 19 years ago, she was a global thought leader in the human capital practice for Towers Perrin. She's the co-author of The Inside Gig, How Sharing Untapped Talent Across Boundaries Unleashes Organizational Capacity, which was published just last month by LifeTree Media. She earned her Ph.D. in Industrial and Organizational Psychology from the University of Albany in SUNY, and she's the recipient of HR People and Strategy's Lifetime Achievement Award and a Fellow of the Society for Industrial and Organizational Psychology. She currently serves on the board of the SHRM Foundation and is an advisor to startups in internal talent mobility. So Edie, welcome. It's a real pleasure to have you here with us.
Thank you so much for having me, Claire. I'm excited to chat with you.
Well, chat we certainly will. I'd love to start with simply understanding a little bit about your background and what drew you initially to the human capital area. We know that you started out or had an early part of your career in the Navy and all kinds of other things. So this sounds like a pretty interesting journey. So can you give us some highlights that will give us some clues about how you've ended up in this area?
Yeah, it's interesting. I think I was one of those kids who always thought, oh, I want to be a psychologist when I grow up. And then I realized kind of early in my years in college that I never wanted to be a clinical psychologist because if people told me their problems, I'd have to tell them my problems right back, which wouldn't be good. So at the same time, I sort of realized that I had this innate sense for business and that I really liked business. And a colleague of mine then told me about the field of industrial and organizational psychology, which it is kind of the psychology of work behavior, right? So it puts together the two things that I was interested in, which was people and behavior and work systems and organizations and how to make them effective. So quite interesting, I was a good student, but I wasn't a great student. And then when I found my calling, if you will, and started majoring in industrial organizational psychology, all of a sudden I became a straight A student because I was really
interesting. Once you find your passion.
Yeah, exactly. So I tapped into that. And so I got my master's, and I was super fortunate while I was getting my master's that I had this opportunity to work with the Navy, with the world's largest personnel R&D center, which was through the Navy, but I was a civilian. And I got trained by Dr. Deming in total quality management. I mean, I had these amazing experiences that I, couldn't have had otherwise. And once I got my PhD, I immediately went into consulting. And so I have this kind of odd career that I'm a career consultant. So I worked for a boutique management consulting firm that specialized in assessment and development. And then I worked for a global management consulting firm, Towers Perrin, in their human capital management practice.
Yeah.
And there I had all kinds of different, experiences. I was their Asia Pacific liaison. So I helped support all the staff in Asia. I became their global thought leader in career management, learning and development, and succession planning, and the West region leader in performance management. And then I left to start my own firm. It was 19 years ago, so I guess it's been a success. And I'm lean back into kind of, where I came from as an industrial psychologist, which is, I focus my practice on how to attract, engage, develop, and retain talent. For me, it's really about bringing out the best of both employees and their organizations. And that's really what I love to do. And then a couple years ago, I worked on a project for like 4 years. It was a volunteer project where a bunch of chief HR officers and other HR thought leaders like myself got together and really thought deeply about, the world of work is changing a lot.
Absolutely.
And how does HR need to change and develop to meet the needs today and tomorrow of their organizations? And so that's kind of shifted a bit of the work that I do. So now a lot of my consulting endeavors are around the future of work and helping companies anticipate change and develop new strategies to optimize talent in operating in new and different ways.
Fantastic. Could you give us a picture of what a typical consulting project might be for you these days?
When I think about my consulting work, I kind of think about it in 3 different streams, right? So there's kind of, if you will, the core of my business is really talent management consulting. So it'd be redesigning performance management processes, implementing a career management process to kind of improve the impact of what people are doing, and designing leadership development programs and doing strategic workforce planning. So that's kind of the core of talent management. And that all relies on my assessment and development background.
Sure.
And then second would be all the work that I do around kind of organization effectiveness, right? So it might be redesigning an organization to improve how it operates, or simply kind of looking and analyzing the system, if you will, of how people work and work together, and making improvements to kind of, whether it be culture or structure or process or talent, whatever that may be. And then third would be kind of this more emerging work around the future of work. And that work tends to be either workshops or strategic planning sessions with leadership teams.
Fantastic. That's an extraordinary range. And one of the elements that particularly caught my ears was that of designing and improving processes for career management. Obviously, that resonates very strongly with the focus of our book and with a lot of our work, because we advocate for companies to offer more career management rather than just picking people up and chewing them up and throwing them out the other end when both sides, or even just one side, is tired. And I wonder, in the work that you do in that area, do you see an increase of companies actually wanting to or recognizing the need to do this?
Well, yes, because when companies implement employee opinion surveys, the number one area that employees are least satisfied with tends to be career management.
Absolutely.
Right? People don't know what opportunities there are within the company that serves their skills. So we kind of get blocked into like, this is my team or this is my department. And what's kind of funny is even within HR, human resources, people are like, I'm a comp person, or I'm a benefits person, or I'm an employee relations person. And they don't know anyone outside of those silos that they operate in. Yeah. So nobody has any idea how they can apply their skills in other parts of the business. And so I find
everybody's dying to develop their skills, right? I mean, we know you cited a study the other day, and we've seen others that say that when somebody enters a company, career development, career growth is on a par, if not sometimes higher ranked than salary.
Yes.
So, everybody wants it, and yet nobody knows how to get it, right?
Yeah, so I kind of made it my mission, if you will, to really help companies be more innovative about, how they think about careers. And so for years, companies were like, oh, well, it's the employee's responsibility to find their development opportunities, or, they kind of put it in the hands of employees who have absolutely no idea how to do it. And then some companies will say they put it in the hands of their managers, but then they don't give the managers any support, and the managers end up to be just as clueless, if you will, as the employees. So it requires an entire support system around it, where you're providing the tools and processes to really help people discover what their passions are. You know what your passion is around career management. I have found my own passion around helping employees and individuals achieve their best. And then helping people find new other ways within the organization about how they can deliver the skills that they have.
Indeed.
Or maybe explore a new area that is of interest to them.
Indeed. And of course, this leads neatly into the fact that you have just published a book, which not only argues strongly in favor of all of this, but gives a great model and methodology for setting this up. The book, as I said in the introduction, is called The Inside Gig. Can you give us a summary, a layman's summary? Let's remember that the audience of this podcast is not just HR leaders. So a real layman's, basic, enthusiastic summary of the book, please.
Yeah, so the title, The Inside Gig, really comes from our observations of the gig economy. Like, what's happening around us, and why are all these people, interested in gigs? And it's funny because everybody thinks the reason people are doing gigs is to make more money, or B, because they want to be their own boss. And that's totally true. But there's another reason why people engage in the gig economy, and it's because they want diversity and choice in the work that they do. And so I started thinking, well, why can't you provide that inside of your own organization? Which, of course, you can.
Yes.
So that's kind of where the title for The Inside Gig came from, and where one of the initial ideas that kind of sparked it. So fundamentally, The Inside Gig is about helping companies develop a new way to manage talent in the organization that helps them get work done in a different way. So it's about more dynamically matching the skills that your employees have to the work that needs to get done, and not handcuffing people to the jobs that they're in, but allowing them to kind of, if you will, bring their full selves to work and all the skills and interests that they have, and then allowing people to kind of, opt into projects based on their interests. We think that when people are allowed to operate in this more new way, it'll help employees thrive, because they get to not only lean into their strengths, but also, bring all the skills that they have and the opportunity to explore their passions and their interests, where they might want to, oh, I see that going on in another part of the company. That's kind of interesting. I'd like to find out more about that. And it also helps companies, kind of both sides of the equation. It helps companies be more agile, super important right now, and to shift talent to where they need it. So it can increase organizational productivity by really, tapping into the interests that employees have, and it helps you get projects started more quickly by helping you find the right talent, and really, avoid some of the unnecessary expense of bringing in a contractor to do work that, frankly, your employees would like to do.
So let's go into at least a little bit more depth on your talent operating model. There are a lot of different fundamentals in there in terms of different notions, the idea of thinking about talent in terms of abundance rather than scarcity. Can you take us through the model in a simple way that allows us to get a picture?
Well, there's kind of a lot to it. The
I know we can't do it all.
I'm gonna hit the highlights. Is what I'm gonna do. So,
wonderful.
The talent operating model really focuses on what are the new ways of working that we need to change to adapt to this kind of this changing nature of work and the need for companies to be kind of more agile as a business. So if I were just to kind of focus on some of the highlights, some of the really, really kind of important concepts around how we need to think about operating differently. And the first is the concept around talent sharing across organizational boundaries as a better way to optimize the use of talent, because we put them in a box called a job in general, and then we forget that people come with past histories and other skills that they have, or they have passions and interests and things that they're pursuing outside of work that we might be able to actually leverage within the company. So the idea of really more seamlessly sharing talent, which got to the point that you talked about, which is that requires managers to shift their mindset from one of talent scarcity, which is these are my employees, I covet and I hoard them, to a mindset of abundance, which is this is all of the talent that we have in the company, and we can tap into any of that talent based on the needs of the project that we're working on. So in order to do that, one of the other principles within this talent operating model is you need to know what you have, right? So each company needs to have an accurate inventory of the talent that they have. Companies have accurate inventories of the products that they have.
Indeed.
If they're making products, but for some odd reason, they don't have an accurate inventory of the skills that they have available to them within the company. And that kind of ends up being a fundamental foundation of what you need to kind of live this new talent operating model. And then companies, managers, leaders need to adopt a growth mindset. You may have heard that term, but the idea that we need to be always learning, and that we value learning within an organization. But the other thing is that we need to provide employees with more kind of micro learning opportunities, self-directed learning opportunities, so that people can learn while doing. I think we have this very kind of old-fashioned static idea about learning in companies, which is you put people in a classroom, you teach them something. Most adults, frankly, don't learn that way. And God, the world of work is changing so quickly. You just can't do that. You got to you have to change, the wheels out while the plane is flying, Absolutely. So it's more about learning while doing. And then the last piece I'll hit on that's kind of a key piece of this idea is that we need to move from these traditional hierarchical structures that we have in place to really thinking more about getting work done through more project teams that don't care about crossing organizational boundaries to get the right talent on the team to get the work done. So that's a big overview. It's a lot of different things.
It's a wonderful overview. Obviously, everybody should be going out and buying your book and reading it. But I think you've given us some really tasty morsels to think about there in terms of some of the big notions and the approaches which shake things up a little bit.
I think the cool thing about this concept about, kind of working across these boundaries and bringing in the talent that you need where you need it is we've lived in these siloed work structures for so long. When you start to operate that way, you really bust those functional silos.
Yes, indeed.
And help people think more broadly about where they can contribute.
Very definitely. And I know that you've referred to your own earlier experience of being stuck in a silo at Towers Perrin. I suspect we won't have time to go into the detail about that, but I think probably all of us can empathize with some work experience at some point where we definitely knew that our talents weren't being used to the fullest or listened to or known about or anything. And it's a ludicrous thing to happen, really, but it's what generally happened until terribly recently. So thank you for being the one to write the book about it and get the word further out. What I would love, though, is if you could walk us through a case study of a company or an organization that is getting this right. You know, maybe they're clients of yours who've done it through you, or maybe it's the Here Technologies company. I don't really mind which one it is, but it would be great to hear just a little story about a company that went from A to Z in the process.
Great. And so we have many examples in the book of different companies that have gone through this process. We do 2 deep case studies in the book, and then we kind of refer to a lot of different companies all throughout it. But so I'll take one case study, which is from here, where we incubated the idea, just because it's really rich. And I think that your listeners can really resonate with a lot of the, like, you know, why did they do this in the first place, right? You know, so yeah, they wanted it. Their you know, the person who led HR wanted to find a better way to match talent to the work, but ultimately it was because they're a technology company and their work was changing really quickly. So they felt like they needed to be more agile as an organization and be able to shift talent to, you know, like customer needs are changing, our business dynamics are changing, and how do we be more of an agile organization so that we can be more responsive to those kinds of changes? That was one thing. And the other was they really wanted to improve their speed with which they could get work done. So if you're going to put together a project team, like, how do we help people do that much more quickly and accurately with the right team? And then the last, which I think a lot of people are going to relate to, is they had to do it in a way that helped them to manage their costs. Because I started talking earlier about the rise of the gig economy.
Indeed.
I think what's happened is a lot of companies have said, oh, well, you know, we can just hire a contractor to do that. Right? That's the way we can, you know, bring in new skills to the company or get some small project done. And that's great, and that's important, and that is a true source of talent for companies. But I think there's become an over-reliance on that. And then you like think about your employees who are like totally disheartened because like that was a super cool project and I could have done that, but now you brought in this outside person to do that work, right? So, and I hear this a lot from companies, which is there's this over-reliance on leaning outside of the organization, and it drives costs up within a company. So what if you could rely more on your company? So the idea of allowing people to work on projects to reduce their reliance on contractors was really kind of another key part of their reason. So they implement this kind of inside gig approach where people get to, you know, where managers would put up a project and, you know, really specifically say what kind of skills they need and how long is the project going to be and, you know, what is it about? And then employees got matched to those opportunities based on their skills, but they could also search a database and look for projects that they were interested in. And by in their very first year of implementing kind of this new way of working, rather than hiring contractors or new employees, they were able to engage the equivalent of 111 full-time equivalent hours of work, just based on the number of hours employees contributed to doing projects that were on the platform that were outside of their day-to-day job.
Amazing.
So when you look at what did people work on that was outside of the normal realm of their job and maybe even outside of their own profit and loss line of business, they were able to estimate, this is an estimate, that they basically saved $14 million, the equivalent of $14 million, because they leveraged their own resources versus going out and hiring other people. Fantastic. They also were able to increase their net promoter score or their employee opinion, you know, view of their company. And what I thought was really cool, which I think wasn't really an intention when they went into this, is because of the talent sharing across the organization, they had 85% of the people were working on cross-functional teams. So those teams outside of their own discipline.
So they're going out looking, understanding, connecting in ways that they'd never done before.
Yeah, think about the business acumen that you build amongst your people when they understand, oh, that's what you do in that department and how my work, impacts you. And,
yes,
how we're one big system and we have to put this all together. Like that to me is absolutely fascinating. And then 64% of the projects in this company in this time frame were global.
Yeah.
So now think about, if you're in the UK and you're working with colleagues, in France and in Asia and in, the United States, just think about kind of the cultural awareness that starts to build.
Absolutely.
Of working with colleagues from all these different ecosystems, if you will. And Claire, before we started this podcast, we were talking about what a small world it is.
Yeah.
And I think it makes it a smaller world, right? It helps us understand our shared experiences. It helps us to learn from one another. And so I think those were a lot of side benefits that they got from working in this new way that I think will have long-term payoffs.
I would think so. And it's wonderful that you're able to point on the one hand to some very tangible, hard, numerical, financial and productivity based improvements, but also all this range of softer improvements, which may not demonstrate themselves in quite such an obvious way immediately. But over the long term, I'm guessing that it's also going to lead to greater employee engagement and longer tenure and all that kind of thing. The cultural awareness and acumen that you're talking about, undoubtedly. And I'm also assuming that one of the other huge benefits of this is that I'm making an assumption, and correct me if I'm wrong, but when people get into these projects that they've typically volunteered for, or at least held their hands up for, then they're going into experiences which could be difficult, which could be quite painful in some cases, because maybe everything doesn't work perfectly. It never does, right? But they are probably sensing that they were the ones who held up their hands. They weren't forced into it. Therefore, they're much more likely to have a very open and positive attitude to even the not so easy parts of it. Was that something that you observed as well?
Yeah, people went into it because they wanted to do it. Yeah. So, I mean, we don't have any specific, or more anecdotal evidence around that. But I think when you choose the work that you do, you are far more engaged in that work. As a consequence of that, you're also more productive, right? Because you know that feeling of like completely getting lost in your work because you're so like, I wanted this opportunity and I wanted to learn this new thing and this is so interesting.
Yeah.
So, I think there are those benefits that come from allowing people to have that choice in their work.
Superb. Well, I'd love to interrogate you for the whole afternoon about all the other benefits of that particular case, but let's move on a little bit and turn it around to the individual side for a moment. If you were going to sit down with a Generation Z professional starting his or her career now, what sort of practical or other tips would you give him or her to develop a fulfilling and probably longer work life than you or I have been experiencing or expecting?
Yeah, there is so much evidence that work is changing dramatically right in front of our very eyes.
Yes, it's not a theory.
My recommendation for these younger employees is always be learning. That should be their mantra, because if the half-life, they say the half-life of skills is 5 years today. So half of everything you know today will be obsolete in 5 years.
Yeah.
So if you aren't continuously upskilling yourself or reskilling yourself,
Yeah.
you're going to be irrelevant. You're not going to have job opportunities for the future. And what's interesting is when you look at the freelance economy versus full-time employees, freelancers spend much more of their time engaging in personal development because they know that it's critical to their survival.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Whereas I think employees in companies, they don't take as many opportunities. They don't, it generally comes at certain points of their work life cycle, as opposed to thinking about, how am I continuously sharpening my saw, learning new tools, focusing on a new.
What's more, they've typically been spoon-fed training. They've been active to step out of the comfort zone of planned, programmed training at key, correct or not, but key stages in their career in any particular organization.
I think what's really important is for them to have a conversation with their manager about where's the company going, what's the future, and what skills are going to be more valued by the company in the future, so that they can start developing those skills to keep themselves employable.
And once again, as you were saying earlier, of course, the managers need also to be capacitated to have those conversations in a way that is friendly and encouraging, rather than a bit of shoulder shrugging and, hey, I don't really know, which I can imagine shows up more often than one would like.
One of the reasons we think that the inside gig is really great for kind of where organizations are going is, most managers are like, I'm not going to tell you about taking another job because I don't want to lose you. You're a valuable part of my team, right? Yeah. So the research says that they actually resist internal talent mobility, the idea of moving people to a different job. But within the inside gig, we break down that concept of internal talent mobility, make it much more flexible. So it's not about leaving your job to have a new experience. It's just about making room for a project where you can learn and grow. So it's much more, I think, digestible because of its bite-sized nature.
Absolutely. It also leads into attitudes that we're examining and researching for a forthcoming book, which is likely to be called something like Talent Champions, which is the idea of talking about those people in organizations who very often are not in HR, but the ones who are like talent magnets. They attract people, they nurture them, they encourage them, they stretch them, they throw them into projects. It's coming from the individual pull as opposed to the organizational push, as your inside gig model is advocating. But we're very excited about the fact that we've met and interviewed and adore the approach of these guys who are just constantly nurturing from the very youngest to the very most senior people in all these different ways. And so often that's based around giving them projects, stretching them. So it's not in any formal framework, but it's something that some of these leaders have a natural penchant for. And so, the organizations where there's both that and an attitude of let's set up an inside gig framework, they're going to be the ones that soar in the future, aren't they?
I love the fact that you're kind of moving in this direction, because it's very true, and the research really bears out that managers that continuously develop their talent are talent magnets. And so if you want to be the person who gets stuff done in your company, you want to be the people with the best talent on your team. Yeah. And again,
to be, sorry, I was just going to say, I want to add to that. It's not just on your team. I think it's also being team agnostic as you're advocating for the inside gig. It's not just about saying, hey, this guy on my team is great, I'm going to give him lots of projects in my team. It's also about these guys who have such vision that they say, I don't care whether he's doing a project in my team or not. What I want is for this this, person that I'm nurturing to be stretched in all the directions that are going to make him or her thrive and create value for him or herself above all, but that will in its turn create value for the organization. And that sort of agnosticism about where it happens is so crucial. And it's wonderful that you're pushing it from the other side.
Yeah, we are completely aligned on that. I think this is the, if you will, the secret ingredient to getting the most out of your organization and helping helping individuals thrive, which helps the organization thrive.
Exactly.
Absolutely.
So I feel as though, we're coming to a natural end, and you probably need to push on to your next meeting anyway. But Edie, it's been absolutely fascinating having you here with me. I would have loved to spend much longer than this, but the audience has a tolerance for about 45 minutes. So I think we've done our job. And I'm confident that we're going to be exchanging conversations and ideas for a long time from now on. And I'm just super grateful to you for having shown up and for having shared so generously all your thinking and all your experience and ideas.
Well, thank you. I feel this new connection and kismet with you, that, like-minded people. Thank you so much for inviting me on and allowing me to share some of my stories and hopefully inspire some people to change the way they work, to allow people to bring their more their full selves to work and help people learn and grow. And so this has been really fun. Thank you.
Thank you, Edie. Let me just remind everybody that the book is called The Inside Gig, and you can buy it on Amazon and all kinds of places. Just look for it and go out and buy it, because it's not just a nice theory, it's a process that you can apply to your organization tomorrow if you choose so to do. So thank you, Edie. Let's wrap it up there, and I'll say goodbye and see you soon. Thank you so much.
Take care.
And
Thanks.
you. Bye-bye.
We hope you enjoyed hearing from this month's guest as much as we did.
Do go and check out our work on disrupt-your-career.com and come back soon. Thank you.